Your kidneys filter 50 gallons of blood a day, and whether minerals like calcium and oxalate bind together into stones depends more than most people realize on what you pour into your glass. Here are 20 drinks that quietly support that system, including number 12, brewed from something most people throw straight into the compost bin. Number 17, a juice nearly everyone assumes is off limits for kidneys. And number 20, the cheapest and most powerful daily habit of them all. Let's start with the one everything else depends on. Number 1, plain water. There's no clever trick here, and that's exactly the point. Every other drink on this list is, in some sense, a variation on this one. Your kidneys need enough fluid moving through them to keep urine dilute, because concentrated urine is where minerals like calcium and oxalate get close enough together to crystallize into stones. Adequate water intake is one of the most consistently supported, lowest-cost habits in the kidney health research, and it isn't complicated. A simple, old piece of guidance still holds up well. Your urine should run pale yellow, not dark and not perfectly clear. That color is your kidneys giving you real-time feedback on whether you're keeping up. Needs vary with body size, activity, and climate, but for most healthy adults, that lands somewhere in the range doctors have recommended for decades. Everything else on this list is really just water, dressed up with a reason to drink more of it. One thing worth knowing as we get older is that the body's natural thirst signal tend to become less reliable with age, which means waiting until you feel thirsty can leave you run behind before you even notice. Keeping a glass visibly within reach through the day, rather than relying on thirst alone, matters more with every passing decade. And if you want one simple anchor, a full glass of water first thing in the morning, before anything else, is the easiest habit to attach to a routine you already have. Number 2, barley water. Long before bottled electrolyte drinks existed, households across parts of Europe and the Middle East simmered pearl barley in water and drank the strained liquid as a daily tonic. It's a genuinely old habit, and it survives today mostly in home kitchens rather than store shelves. Barley water is mild, slightly starchy, and easy on the stomach, which made a common choice historically for people who were recovering from illness or simply trying to stay hydrated through hot summers without anything sweetened. It contributes meaningfully to daily fluid intake in the same straightforward way plain water does, and some people find its gentle, faintly nutty flavor easier to drink consistently than water alone. Simmer a few tablespoons of pearl barley in water for about 20 minutes. Strain out the grains and let the liquid cool. A little lemon stirred and brightens the flavor and adds the same citrate benefit we'll come back to later in this list. Barley water has largely faded from modern kitchens, edged out by bottled sports drinks and flavored waters, but it costs almost nothing to make and keeps well in the refrigerator for several days, which makes it a genuinely practical option for anyone trying to stay consistent without buying anything new every week. Pearl barley itself is one of the least expensive items in any grocery aisle. A small bag lasts for months, and the strained grains can even be stirred into soup, so nothing goes to waste. Number 3, cucumber mint infused water. This one earns its spot not through some exotic compound, but through simple behavior. Cucumbers are roughly 95% water themselves, and mint add a cooling, refreshing note that makes plain water considerably easier to drink throughout the day. For a lot of people, the biggest obstacle to adequate hydration isn't willpower. It's that plain water gets boring by mid-afternoon. Infused water solves that quietly, without adding sugar or complexity. Traditional spa and market cultures across the Mediterranean and Middle East have leaned on this exact combination for generations, both for its cooling effect in hot climates and simply because it kept people drinking more. Slice half a cucumber and a handful of lightly bruised mint leaves into a large pitcher. Let it sit in the refrigerator for a few hours and refill it throughout the day. Both cucumbers and mint are famously easy to grow at home, even in a modest raised bed or container on a patio, which means this particular pitcher can end up costing you almost nothing beyond the water itself once the growing season gets going. One practical note, a single batch of slices holds its flavor well for about a day of refills before the cucumber starts to fade, so it's worth refreshing the pitcher each morning rather than letting it drift toward bland. And while we're on the subject of where these habits come from, I genuinely like to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment with your country or region, and whether cucumber or mint are easy to grow or find locally, because these traditions look different depending on where you are. Number 4, Watermelon infused water. Watermelon is another naturally high water content fruit, and steeping a few cubes in a pitcher releases just enough natural sweetness to make hydration feel like a small treat rather than a chore. It also contains citrulline, an amino acid that's drawn research interest for its role in blood vessel function, though the amount that transfers into infused water is modest compared to eating the fruit directly. The real value here, much like cucumber and mint, is behavioral. A pitcher of naturally sweet, sugar-free water sitting in the fridge is something people actually reach for, and that consistency matters more over months and years than any single compound does on its own. Cube a cup or two of watermelon. Muddle it lightly to release the juice, and let it infuse for a few hours before serving over ice. If you garden, even a single watermelon vine given enough sun and room to sprawl can produce more fruit than one household can eat fresh, which makes infused water a genuinely practical way to use up extra melon before it goes soft, rather than letting any of it go to waste. Number 5. Chamomile Tea. Chamomile has a long, quiet history as an evening ritual across much of Europe and the Mediterranean, valued as much for its calming reputation as for its gentle flavor. As an unsweetened, naturally caffeine-free tea, it contributes to daily fluid intake without the acid load or added sugar that comes with soda, and its mild flavor makes it an easy substitute for people trying to cut back on sweetened evening drinks. Chamomile hasn't been studied specifically as a kidney protective compound in the way some other plants on this list have, and it's worth being honest about that rather than overstating it. Its contribution here is straightforward, a comforting, sugar-free way to add fluid volume to your day, particularly useful in the evening when cold water feels less appealing. Steep a tea bag or a tablespoon of dried chamomile flowers in hot water for 5 to 10 minutes, and let it become part of your wind-down routine. Chamomile also happens to be one of the easier flowering herbs to grow from seed in a home garden, and dry your own flowers on a screen in a shaded spot is a simple, low-effort project if you'd rather grow your own supply than buy it dried. And if chamomile is a gentle one, the very next tea pours a red, so striking people stop mid-sip to look at it, and it carries something chamomile doesn't, research that specifically connects it to blood pressure. Number 6. Hibiscus Tea. Hibiscus has a striking deep red color and a tart, cranberry-like flavor, and it's been a daily drink across part of Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America for generations, long before it showed up in specialty tea shops. It's naturally caffeine-free, and some research has specifically looked at hibiscus tea's relationship to healthy blood pressure, with certain studies suggesting a modest supportive effect. That connection matters for kidney health, because blood pressure and kidney function are closely linked over the long term, with each one affecting the other. Hibiscus shouldn't be treated as a replacement for blood pressure medication, and if you're managing blood pressure with prescription, it's worth mentioning hibiscus tea to your doctor since it can interact with certain medications. Brew it hot or let it cool for a naturally tart iced tea, and skip the added sugar that many bottle versions include. Dried hibiscus flowers, often labeled by their Spanish name, Jamaica, are widely available and inexpensive at Latin American and Middle Eastern grocers, which makes this one of the easier items on this list to source even if you don't grow it yourself, since hibiscus generally needs a warmer climate than many home gardens can offer. It also cold brews beautifully. A handful of dried flowers left in a pitcher of water in the refrigerator overnight gives you the same deep red color without ever heating the kitchen, and the result pours nicely over ice with that same bright, tart edge. Number 7. Rooibos Tea. Rooibos, sometimes called red bush tea, comes from a shrub native to South Africa's Cedarburg region, where it's been brewed as a daily household drink for well over a century. Unlike green or black tea, rooibos is naturally low in oxalates, the compound that combines with calcium to form the most common type of kidney stone, which makes it a reasonable option for people who are specifically watching their oxalate intake. It's also naturally caffeine-free, giving it a warm, tea-like ritual without the concerns some people have around caffeine in the evening. Traditionally, rooibos was harvested, fermented, and dried by hand using methods passed down through generations of South African farming families, and the tea is naturally sweet. Slightly nutty flavor needs little to nothing added to make it enjoyable. Steep it for 5 to 7 minutes, longer than you might steep green tea, since rooibos doesn't turn bitter with extended brewing the way some other teas do. It's not something most home gardeners outside South Africa can grow themselves, since the plant needs a very particular climate, but it's become widely available in supermarkets and specialty tea shops, and its naturally low oxalate content makes it a genuinely useful option for anyone who's been told to watch that particular number. Here's something worth sitting with before we go any further. The plant part most people throw straight into the compost bin has been used as medicine longer than half the teas already on this list. Keep that in mind, because the next 3 drinks all come from plants most gardeners treat as problems. Number 8. Dandelion Root Tea. If you spend any time gardening, you've almost certainly fought dandelions rather than brewed them, but herbalists have used the roasted root for generations as a coffee-like tea value for traditional association with liver and kidney support. It's worth being precise about the evidence here. Much of dandelion root's reputation comes from traditional and folk use rather than large modern clinical trials, and it hasn't been established as a treatment for any kidney condition. What it does offer is a genuinely pleasant, caffeine-free, earthy tea that works well as a coffee substitute for people trying to reduce caffeine intake in the evening, along with a straightforward contribution to daily fluid volume. If you happen to have dandelions growing untreated in your own yard, the roots can be dug, cleaned, roasted until dark brown, and steeped just like coffee grounds, turning a garden nuisance into an actual, if modest, kitchen ingredient. Just make sure whatever patch you're pulling from hasn't been treated with lawn chemicals or herbicides, since that's obviously not something you want steeping in your teacup. If you'd like an easy reference to the rest of this list, go ahead and save or share this video now so it's here next time you're restocking the pantry. Number 9. Nettle Leaf Tea. Stinging nettle has one of the longer folk medicine histories of any plant covered on this list, used across European herbal traditions for generations as a general tonic, despite the fact that the fresh plant famously stings anyone who touches it without gloves. Once dried and steeped, nettle loses its sting entirely and produces a mild, slightly grassy tea that's been traditionally associated with supporting fluid balance and urinary health. As with dandelion, it's important to separate tradition from proof. Nettle tea hasn't been rigorously established as a treatment for kidney conditions in modern clinical research, and it shouldn't be treated as one. What it reliably offers is a caffeine-free contribution to daily fluid intake, along with small amount of minerals like potassium, which is worth knowing if you're specifically monitoring potassium as part of kidney disease management, since that's exactly the kind of detail your doctor or a renal dietitian can help you weigh. Steep dried nettle leaves in hot water for about 10 minutes, and strain thoroughly before drinking. If you're harvesting nettle fresh from a garden bed or a wild patch rather than buying it dried, always wear thick gloves, since the fine hairs on the fresh leaves are exactly what cause that famous sting, and drying or cooking the leaves is what neutralizes it completely. If you do harvest your own, bundle the tops and hang them upside down somewhere dry and airy for a couple weeks, and one good patch will keep you in tea for a surprising stretch of the year. Number 10. Parsley infused water. Parsley tends to sit forgotten on the edge of a dinner plate, but it has a long-standing folk reputation across Mediterranean and Middle Eastern households as a diuretic herb, traditionally used to support urine flow. That folk reputation predates any biochemical explanation, and modern research on parsley specifically for kidney health remains limited, so it's worth treating this one as a traditional practice rather than a proven remedy. What parsley water reliably offers is a fresh, herbaceous flavor that, much like cucumber or mint, makes plain water more appealing to drink consistently throughout the day. It's also, quite literally, sitting in most people's herb garden or grocery bag already, which makes it one of the easiest and cheapest additions on this entire list to try. Bruise a small handful of fresh parsley leaves, drop them into a pitcher of water, and let it steep for an hour or two in the refrigerator before drinking. Flat leaf and curly parsley both work equally well here, and since parsley grows happily in a small pot on a sunny windowsill, this is another item on the list you can genuinely grow yourself without needing much space at all. Though the next root traveled from Asia into kitchens thousands of years ago, and a spare piece that sprouts right in a glass of water. Number 11. Ginger tea. Ginger has been a staple of traditional medicine across Asia for thousands of years, most commonly associated with settling digestion, but also shows up as a warming, caffeine-free beverage in households where a warm drink before bed is part of daily life. Its primary contribution to a kidney-conscious routine is straightforward: fluid volume without sugar, caffeine, or the acid content found in soda. Some of the compounds in ginger, including gingerol, have been studied for anti-inflammatory properties, and chronic low-grade inflammation is a factor researchers associate with gradual strain on the body systems over time. Kidneys included, though ginger tea itself hasn't been studied as a direct kidney treatment. Slice a few thin pieces of fresh ginger root. Simmer them in water for about 10 minutes, and add a squeeze of lemon if you'd like to combine it with the citrate benefit we'll get to shortly. Fresh ginger root also sprouts easily from a piece left in water on a windowsill. So if you go through it often, growing a bit of your own is genuinely simple, even without a proper garden. And for storing the root itself, a paper bag in a cool, dark drawer keeps it firm for weeks, while a spare piece in the freezer can be grated straight from frozen whenever a pot of tea calls for it. Number 12. Corn silk tea. Here's the one I mentioned at the very start. Corn silk, the fine, thread-like strands you peel away from an ear of corn and almost certainly throw straight into the compost or the trash, has a genuinely old traditional reputation in folk medicine across the Americas, parts of Europe, and traditional Chinese medicine, where it's been used for generations specifically as a tea associated with supporting urinary comfort and fluid balance. It's important to be precise about what that means. Corn silk hasn't been established through rigorous modern clinical trials as a treatment for a kidney disease or any specific urinary condition, and it shouldn't be used as a substitute for medical care if you're experiencing symptoms like pain or blood in your urine, which always warrant a doctor's attention. What corn silk tea does offer, beyond a genuinely surprising bit of kitchen garden trivia, is a caffeine-free way to add fluid volume, along with mild, faintly sweet, grassy flavor that a lot of people find pleasant once they try it. There's something almost poetic about a plant most of us grow specifically to eat the kernels, while quietly discarding a part with its own centuries-long history, sitting right there in a husk. Next time you're shucking corn for dinner, save the silk, rinse it, and simmer a small handful in water for about 10 minutes before straining. If you can't get fresh corn silk, dried versions are available through herbal suppliers. And either way, this is a genuinely low-cost way to try something most modern kitchens have completely forgotten about. And if fresh corn season is short where you live, the silk freezes well in a simple freezer bag or dries on a screen like any other herb. So a handful saved at the height of summer can still be steeping in your kitchen in the middle of winter. Number 13. Green tea. Green tea sits right at the center of the most confused pairing in this entire subject. Does it cause stones or protect against them? The honest answer is that it depends on the details. Green tea carries one of the strongest research profiles of any beverage on this list, largely due to a class of antioxidant compounds called catechins, and in moderate unsweetened amounts, it can reasonably fit into a kidney-conscious routine for many people. Here's where precision matters, though. Green tea, like black tea, contains oxalates, the same compound behind the most common type of kidney stone, and while that isn't a meaningful concern for most people at moderate intake, anyone with a personal history of calcium oxalate stones should talk with their doctor or a renal dietitian about how tea fits into their specific situation, since oxalate content can vary by tea type, brewing strength, and steeping time. For most people without that history, 2 to 3 cups a day, brewed lightly and left unsweetened, is a reasonable amount that brings real antioxidant benefit alongside its contribution to daily fluid intake. Green tea has centered East Asian tea culture for well over 1,000 years, valued as much for the quiet ritual preparing it as for its taste, and that ritual itself, a few minutes of slowing down, is worth something on its own. Loose leaf green tea, brewed a little cooler than boiling to avoid a bitter cup, tends to have a gentler flavor than most bag versions, and it's worth experimenting with steeping time and water temperature until you find a cup you'd actually want to drink daily rather than one you're forcing down for the benefits alone. And if bitterness is what has put you off green tea in the past, cooler water and a shorter steep are almost always a fix, since that bitterness usually comes from brewing too hot rather than from the tea itself. Number 14. Black coffee. If you've ever searched whether coffee is okay for kidney stones, you're not alone. It's one of the most asked questions on this entire topic. Coffee gets an unfairly harsh reputation in a lot of health content. But for most people, plain black coffee in moderation is generally considered a reasonable part of the diet, provided the added sugar, flavored syrups, and heavy creamers, the things that actually cause problems, are kept in check. Coffee is one of the most heavily studied beverages in the world, and moderate consumption has been associated in various studies with a range of neutral to mildly favorable metabolic outcomes for the general population. The old idea that caffeine is significantly dehydrating at typical intake levels has largely been set aside by more recent research for regular coffee drinkers, and plain black coffee contributes to daily fluid volume just as other beverages do. And since it usually gets asked in the same breath, no, beer doesn't earn a spot on this list, whatever the old folk story about flushing stones out says. The alcohol itself works against the steady hydration this entire list is built on. The Real caution belongs with the sugar-loaded specialty drinks sold at many coffee chains, not with the bean itself. Keep it black or close to it, and moderate amounts fit comfortably into most kidney-conscious routines. A basic drip machine or a simple French press at home will get you there just as well as anything from a coffee counter, usually for a fraction of the cost, and without the syrup pump anywhere in sight. And speaking of things worth watching closely, stick around, because in just a few minutes we're going to clear up a common misconception about a juice most people assume is completely off limits. The one I mentioned right at the start, and the reason it actually earned a real place on this list might surprise you. Number 15. Diluted beet juice. Beets have a long history as a root cellar staple across Eastern Europe, valued for how well they store through winter months when fresh produce was scarce. Beet juice is rich in nitrates, compounds a body converts into nitric oxide, which plays a role in blood vessel dilation and blood flow, an area of genuine ongoing research interest, particularly around exercise performance and blood pressure. Straight beet juice is intensely concentrated, both in flavor and in natural sugar, so diluting it with water cuts that concentration while still delivering a meaningful dose. One practical note worth knowing. Beets are also naturally higher in oxalates, so anyone managing a personal history of oxalate-related kidney stones should treat beet juice as an occasional addition rather than a daily habit, and it's worth a conversation with a renal dietitian if that applies to you. For most people without that specific concern, mixing a small amount of beet juice with an equal or greater part water makes for a genuinely interesting, earthy addition to the rotation. Beets are also one of the more forgiving root vegetables to grow in a home garden, tolerating cooler weather better than many other crops, which makes homegrown beet juice a realistic option for anyone with even a small backyard plot come harvest season. One note for the garden-minded. The beet greens are a different story from the roots. They're among the higher oxalate leafy greens. So if you've been told to watch oxalates, they belong in the compost bin rather than the juicer. Number 16. Diluted pomegranate juice. Pomegranates have been prized across the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and parts of Asia for thousands of years, showing up in ancient texts as a symbol of vitality long before anyone understood their antioxidant content. Pomegranate juice is rich in polyphenol, plant compounds studied for antioxidant properties, and unsweetened varieties, diluted with water, offer flavor and fluid volume without the heavy sugar concentration of drinking it straight. As with several other juices on this list, straight pomegranate juice delivers a meaningful sugar load in a small volume, and high sugar intake has been associated with increased kidney stone risk over time, which is exactly why dilution matters here rather than being an optional extra step. Mix unsweetened 100% pomegranate juice with an equal part water, and treat it as an occasional flavorful option rather than an everyday staple, particularly given its cost compared to some of the simpler drinks earlier on this list. In warmer climates, pomegranate trees can actually be grown in a large container or a sunny corner of the yard, and a single mature tree can produce more fruit in a good year than most households can juice through before it spoils. And because the flavor is so assertive, a single fruit goes a long way once it's diluted. The juice of one pomegranate stretched with water can comfortably fill several glasses, which sets up the one I promised to clear up at the very start of this video. Number 17. Diluted cranberry juice. And the clarification I promised you. Does cranberry juice help kidney stones? It gets asked constantly, and the honest answer is more specific than a simple yes or no. Cranberry juice is one of the most persistent reputations of any drink on this list, widely marketed as a urinary health remedy. And I want to be genuinely careful here, because there's a real difference between what cranberry juice can plausibly support and what it's often sold as doing. Cranberry juice is not a cure or a guaranteed prevention for kidney problems or urinary tract infections, and research specifically on cranberry for UTI prevention is mixed, with some studies showing modest benefit for certain people and others showing no meaningful effect at all. It is absolutely not a treatment for an active infection or for kidney disease. And if you suspect an infection, the right move is always a doctor, not a juice aisle. What earns diluted, unsweetened cranberry juice its place on this list is narrower and far more specific than the marketing suggests. It's recognized as a comparatively lower phosphorus beverage option, which is a genuinely useful detail for anyone paying attention to phosphorus intake, particularly people managing kidney disease under medical guidance. Diluting it with water also cuts the sharp tartness that makes straight cranberry juice hard to drink without piling in sugar, while further reducing sugar concentration per serving. Traditional use of cranberries among indigenous peoples in North America goes back centuries, valued originally as a tart, storable fruit, and that folk association with urinary comfort likely comes from certain compounds that may make it harder for some bacteria to stick to bladder wall. Interesting. Still being explored, and again, not a substitute for medical care. Choose unsweetened 100% cranberry juice. Dilute it roughly 1 part juice to 2 parts water, given its natural tartness, and think of it as a useful lower phosphorus flavor option rather than remedy. Number 18. Diluted apple juice. Apple juice tend to get lumped in with sugary drinks in general health advice, but unsweetened apple juice, diluted with water, earns a specific, evidence-informed spot here for what it doesn't contain as much as for what it does. It's naturally lower in phosphorus and potassium than many other fruit juices, which is precisely why it's sometimes recommended in moderate, diluted amounts within kidney-conscious and even kidney disease-specific eating patterns, always in coordination with a renal dietitian rather than decided on your own. Dilution matters for a second reason too, cutting the sugar concentration roughly in half compared to drinking it straight, while still giving you flavor and fluid volume. This is one of those cases where an old household habit, stretching juice with water simply as a matter of economy, happens to line up neatly with modern nutritional guidance around lower phosphorus beverages. Mix unsweetened 100% apple juice with an equal part water, and treat it as an occasional flavored option rather than a primary beverage, particularly if you're managing kidney disease and working with specific fluid or potassium allowances. If you're lucky enough to have access to a backyard apple tree or a local orchard, pressing your own cider and diluting it yourself is about as close to the original version of this habit as you can get, long before store shelves existed at all. Number 19. Plain sparkling water. For anyone who genuinely misses a fizz of soda, plain sparkling water is one of the most useful substitutions on this entire list, because it removes the 2 biggest kidney-related concerns in soda, added sugar and, in the case of dark cola specifically, phosphoric acid, while keeping the sensory satisfaction that made soda appealing in the first place. There's been some public confusion over the years about whether carbonation itself is a problem for kidneys or bones. So let's settle it once and for all. Is sparkling water bad for your kidneys? The research on plain, unflavored sparkling water has been genuinely reassuring on that front. It's the added acids and sugars in flavored sodas that carry concern, not the carbonation itself. And plain sparkling water contributes fully to your daily fluid intake in the same way still water does. If you're weaning off regular soda, plain sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon or lime is one of the more satisfying swaps you can make, though it's worth reading labels on flavored versions carefully, since some quietly include added sugar or sodium. A home carbonation machine can make this an especially cheap habit to maintain over the years, since a single tank of carbon dioxide typically carbonates far more water than buying bottled sparkling water ever would for the same cost. The label to look for is plain carbonated water with nothing else listed, no juice, no citric acid, no sweeteners of any kind. And once you know the 2 or 3 clean brands at your local store, this becomes a zero-effort habit. And that leaves one final drink, the single best daily habit on this entire list, and the one everything before has quietly been building toward. Number 20. Lemon lime citrus water. Here it is, the one worth the wait. Lemons and limes are rich in citric acid, and when your body processes it, it converts a portion into citrate, a compound your urine relies on to bind calcium before it has a chance to link up with oxalate and form the most common type of kidney stone. Combining both lemon and lime in 1 pitcher of water gives you a genuinely concentrated citrate contribution, using a simple, homemade approach rather than the heavily sweetened bottled lemonades and and limeade sold in stores, whose sugar content works directly against the very benefit you're trying to get. Clinical research on citrate-based dietary approaches for people prone to calcium oxalate stones has consistently pointed toward higher urinary citrate as protective. And while a homemade citrus water isn't a substitute for prescribed citrate therapy, if your doctor has recommended one, it's a genuinely low-cost, low-risk habit that lines up with that same evidence. This is also where apple cider vinegar deserves a word, because it gets recommended constantly as a way to dissolve stones. The citrate story belongs to lemons and limes, not vinegar, and straight shots of vinegar are rough on tooth and enamel in a way that a diluted pitcher of citrus water isn't. If a recipe called for knocking back undiluted vinegar, that's the one to skip. Traditional citrus and water combinations show up across nearly every culture with access to lemons and limes, all arriving at roughly the same formula long before urinary citrate had a name. Slice a whole lemon and a whole lime into a large pitcher of water. Muddle them lightly to release the oils and juice, and keep in your refrigerator as your everyday go-to. If you live somewhere with mild winters, a dwarf lemon or lime tree grown right in a large pot can supply a surprising amount of fruit for a plant that small. And for anyone who spent years tending a garden, there's something genuinely satisfying about a daily health habit that quite literally grows on your own patio. A covered pitcher keeps well in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 days, and a fresh round of slices each morning means the habit takes almost no thought to maintain once it's part of your routine. If you made it this far, you now have a genuinely complete, practical picture of what to keep in your kitchen for your kidneys. And I want to leave you the honest version of what that picture actually means. None of these 20 drinks are a cure, and none of them replace the basics your doctor has likely already told you matter most. Staying active, managing blood pressure and blood sugar, and keeping up with regular checkups, especially if you have any personal or family history of kidney disease. What these drinks offer is something quieter but still genuinely useful, a low-cost, low-risk way to stack small, consistent choices in your favor, day after day, glass after glass. And remember that no single drink here does all the work by itself. Movement, sleep, and the rest of how you eat matter just as much. So think of these 20 as one supportive piece of a larger picture. If you take nothing else from this video, pick 3 or 4 of these that genuinely appeal to you, whether that's plain lemon lime water, hibiscus tea, or something as unexpected as corn silk, and simply keep them stocked and easy to reach. Consistency is where the real benefit lives, not in any single perfect drink. If you're managing kidney disease specifically, please treat this list as a starting point for a conversation with your doctor or a renal dietitian, not a replacement for one, since individual fluid, potassium, and phosphorus needs vary enormously from person to person. For everyone else, this is simply a practical, evidence-informed way to think differently about what's already sitting in your refrigerator or your garden. If this video gave you a clearer sense of what actually reach for, go ahead and hit like, since it genuinely helps this reach more people looking for the same straightforward, honest information. Drop a comment and tell me which drink on this list surprised you the most, whether that's corn silk, diluted cranberry juice, or plain old lemon lime water. And let me know if any of these are already part of your routine. And if you haven't subscribed to Healthy Roots yet, now's a good time, because we cover real nutrition science and traditional food wisdom every single week. The kind of practical information meant to be used, not just watched once and forgotten. Sometimes the most meaningful support for your health really is that simple. It's just what you choose to pour into your glass.